You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
So we'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. This is a special meeting. It is Thursday, December 3rd, 2020. It is 7 p.m. We have no public hearing scheduled for this evening. We're deliberating on two applications or two projects that are actually have multiple applications connected with those projects. So we'll begin, though, by going through, introduce members of the commission and staff. Joe Chadwick, are you here?
Joe Chadwick is present.
Joe Viuzzo, are you here?
Joe Viuzzo is present.
Marcy Pelusi. Marcy, are you here?
Marcy Pelusi here.
Fred Russo. Fred, are you here?
Fred is visual, but I'm not getting anything. Can you hear us, Fred? Wave if you can, maybe.
Fred.
Well, I can see him. I don't see that he's hearing us for some reason.
Right. You're not hearing us.
He's not hearing us. Okay.
Okay, so you're calling in? Okay.
I'll wait till he does. If I'll call him.
Okay. Yeah, I think Fred usually does both.
Yes.
He watches and then calls in on the phone. And we'll just go through the list. So Paul Higgins, Paul, are you here?
I am here.
Okay. Unmute. He's telling you.
He's unmuted.
Okay, he is unmuted. He asking you to unmute? I mean,
I gotta give him a call.
okay.
Well, now he tried it himself.
Okay.
If he hits *6 on his phone, he might be unmuted.
How about now?
You're
Can
on.
you hear me? We're
Yes.
good?
Yes.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, Fred, thank you. So Fred Russo, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay. And Harry, you're here?
Yes, sir.
And I think Caitlin has the night off, but our clerk recording secretary, Michelle, I see Michelle.
Yes.
He does not have the night off.
Okay. Okay, in terms of our members deliberating, I believe John Less has recused himself, so we need an alternate. And am I correct that it's Fred who's been attended to all the public hearings? Is that
Correct.
okay? Is that correct, Harry?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So Fred will be sitting in for John. So Paul, it looks like unless one of us passes away in the middle of this meeting, we may not need you, but you never know. Okay. So then turning to our old business, and I'm Chuck Anderson, Chair. We're supposed to just, in terms of the protocol for COVID meetings, we're supposed to identify ourselves whenever we speak. Again, we don't have a public hearing this evening, so we don't have to go through that protocol. But just for for purposes, I think it's for people who are calling in, may not see us, may not know who's speaking. We're supposed to identify ourselves before we speak. So that's, and we're turning then to the old business. The first three items are the Mariner's Landing proposal, the anchor reef at 60 Maple Street. And it consists of the site plan and coastal site plan, the 3-lot subdivision, and the PDD modification master plan amendment for the mixed-use development. And I think we can consider all of these three together. Obviously, when we get to the point of resolutions, we would have separate resolutions, but of course, they're all related. So we can just, the discussion will kind of relate to one another. So we'll take up those items first. And again, to refresh everyone, what we're talking about is the proposal is for 147 dwelling units, which is, I believe, 77 more than was approved in the last round, and also some commercial space for a coffee shop and a public amenities area and a public area as well as old walkways and upgrades to the dock that's out there. So, Harry, is there anything we need to be refreshed on before we start? Is there any additional information that you'd like to call to our attention?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to share my screen for a moment and discuss a couple items that went out. You got 1 second. Just clicked the wrong thing. All right. We did receive a memorandum from the town engineer, and I sent that out to the commission. I believe that was sent out yesterday and put in the Dropbox. I'd like to formally withdraw that. However, it should have been broken into 2 memos because it includes information on the tidal basin PDD application as well as this PDD for 60 Maple Street Anchor Reef. So I just noted here that withdrawing that, I'd like to resubmit in its place a memorandum dated today from the town engineer with respect simply to 60 Maple Street. And this is simply information that's already present on the plans. This is not new information. The FEMA flood hazard area is as referenced on the plans, and the elevations used to calculate the depth of flooding is also present on them. This is not new information. It can be derived from plans by anyone. It's simply presented by the town engineer since he has the credential, so that the commission can refer to it. So I'd just like to also let you know that we received final comments from John Goucher, the DEP, and
Hey, Harry, before you go on, can I ask a question
sure,
on that last memo? Could you go back to it?
sure, hang on a second.
Can you just explain the depth, or when they say depth of flooding? Like, I'm assuming that I understand the proposed grades are at 12 and 11, but what does he mean by approximate depth of flooding? That the 0 meaning no depth, or that it floods at elevation 0 and you're 11 feet above the flood water?
No, my understanding is 0. It indicates there would be no flooding in the 100-year storm event, and that there would be up to 1 foot of flood water present on site in some spot. So he's also showed.
So that doesn't mean that at elevation 1, it's meant to be a depth of, okay. All right, I just found it confusing.
Well, you have an AE 12 designation, which means my understanding is the 100-year storm event is going to flood to an elevation 12 feet above sea level. The grades on site vary from 11 feet to 13 feet.
Right, so you're potentially between 11 and 12, 1 foot.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the grades at the Maple Street entrance, 12 feet,
Right.
which is right at flood stage, and the same thing at the Indian Neck.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
That's how much water may show up on the site during a 100-year flood event.
That's
Right,
correct.
right,
That's correct.
okay. It's clear now. Thank you.
I'm sort of double tasking you, so I'm going to have to admit a couple people in the waiting room. Going solo, it's going to be hopefully this will stop, but I'm going to have to periodically check to make sure I'm not keeping people out of the meeting. So let me go back to John Goucher's comments. And these went to the commission, I believe, yesterday. So hopefully you've all read them. I just have these here to refer to, and I think they're self-explanatory. But I will just point out they're here, green, submitted to the commission. And this is in response to a statement made during the public hearing that since those final comments were outstanding and due to time constraints with respect to the amount of time the public hearing's been open, I believe the public hearing was closed with the tacit understanding that Mr. Goucher's comments would be submitted in a fashion similar to those that might be submitted by town staff post the close of the public hearing. So I also have here as reference all the documents in the file which can be pulled up. I've simply pulled up here for easy reference some of the plan items that I can either leave them up. For example, this is the general plan of the development. It shows a lot of the underground utilities proposed, the drainage and so forth. This is a little bit cleaner plan where you can see the 4 buildings with their footprints, massive recreation area, the extension of the riverfront walkway up to parking that's proposed at the end of would be a continuation of access by in between property now owned by the brewery and the repurposed MIF buildings. It's now condominium units. This is the road that goes down to Nellie Green's and the marina, Branford Landing. So there's a parking area also here surrounding the passive recreation area and the parking. All this has been discussed, of course, in the courtyard with the pool and so forth here. And this is the existing parking in the development and existing. So those documents are available here for viewing if anybody wants to refer to them. I also posted, these are the most recent plans, again, that were submitted just prior to the public hearing session on the 5th. And I believe all commissioners received paper copies of these small reduced size in their packet. Here are the most recent revised landscaping plans. I have the new blow up, even more detailed blow up around the sort of choke points, if you will, between building A and the river walk. And give it one more here. Oh, no. Second page of this here, which is a choke point between building C and the Riverwalk. And then I have this most recently revised public access plan. And that is it for references at the moment, though I can pull up anything in the file if the commission wants. So I think I'll stop there. And if you have any questions or want me to do anything to support the discussion, let me know.
Chuck Anders here. Thank you, Harry. What I think probably makes sense is let's first start with the basic issue is, are we looking to approve or deny the application? And then if we deny, we direct Gary to direct a denial. If it's approval, then we talk about conditions and things like that. So those are sort of just throwing out the big issues. There was opposition to this proposal. The main opposition, I think, was from surrounding neighborhood. Basically, the thought was that the density was too much. That there's been a lot of signs that if you walk in the area, there's certainly a lot of signs posted that it's just above what was originally proposed, and it's just overdeveloped for the site. There were some questions about the quality of life that's affected if you go through a 2 or 3 year period of construction. And there were some issues concerns about traffic. Those are the main things in opposition. In favor, the existing Anchor Reef Condominium Association, which frankly are the most immediate neighbors, were in support. There were also public businesses in support. There are amenities proposed in terms of the public access and the open space and the coffee shop type of use, which would sort of invite the public to go down there to sort of make it try not to privatize the shoreline, as we say, to kind of open it up. There was I believe, a proposal. We brought up the issue of affordable housing because, again, it's sort of high density, and that's where we want to get some affordable housing. The applicant, their offer, I believe, was using the 77 over what was approved, $10,000 for each. There was a contribution of $77,000 for affordable housing use. And there was I think that John Gauscher and DEP, in terms of the coastal site plan, I believe that they were okay with the proposals from the consistency with the Coastal Area Management Act and consistency with coastal resources. I guess in addition, they proposed some off-site improvements for traffic calming in certain places. So those are trying to summarize where, some of the pros and cons. So anyone want to start? I'm happy to start if no one else does, but okay. I am generally in favor of this. I am sensitive to the neighbors' concerns. I think they are legitimate. I have seen the signs. I've read all the emails. I've read the letters. I've heard the comments, the concern, and I kind of recognize some of the concerns. Are we going to be like we were in the 80s? Condo capital again. We're overdevelopment, and that's the theme. This is the density is a lot more than what was there originally, and those are fair points. That said, I think one of the things I'm most, in terms of the neighbor impacts, I give more credence, frankly, to the neighbors that are right there, which is the existing Anchor Reef. They are going to have to live with the impacts, and they seem to be very supportive of this, in both the letters and speaking. So I give that probably more weight. Most of the other neighbors may be on the other side of the river. Not sure that that's fair, but whatever. But the ones who I think I give the most weight are the ones that are living there. It does. I think it does sort of fulfill what we're trying to do in terms of opening up the shoreline or the riverfront area. And again, which the Stony Creek Brewery, which is not, it's gotten people used to seeing, I think, what a jewel the Branford River is. And this, again, having a restaurant or a public type of use that invites the public to come down there, and an open space area, which is next to it, is certainly a benefit. And I think people will use it. So it's not simply the public will have the opportunity to go down and enjoy that. And hopefully we get the walkway connected so that it goes places. It's not going to connect further along the river as we get to the development. The affordable housing, again, we were kind of springing this on them, and I understand everyone's proposal. this is this is where you want affordable housing for higher density things. This is where you try to get it done. There is a need for affordable housing. They did present some data, I think, that showed that it would be, given the market of what they're doing in terms of the financial hit that they would take if they deed restricted would be substantial. So, and I get that. And they're 10,000 per unit for the additional. I think what they're claiming is, and look what else we're doing. we're providing this other the public access and so forth. So that's so that works. I could go for more, but I think if we do that, I like the idea of putting it in a fund that's reserved not for studies, because I think we can get grants to do studies, but it's actually used for either the purchase or repair or maintenance of existing affordable housing, and the Planning Zoning Commission determines that. So if someone wants to, makes a presentation to us, and we want to buy a 2-family and reserve one of them, somebody for affordable, for a housing group or a nonprofit wants to do that, that would be a source of funding for something like that. That maybe they could come to us and we could authorize that. I think I've seen that done in other towns, so that's a plus. And again, I'm open to more. The CAM approval, that's critical. This is an area that is subject, it's in the AE zone, it's subject to flooding, but it's not as much flooding, I gather, as other areas. And the DEP at least has not, they didn't deny the application, or didn't recommend that we deny the application, so they seem to find it okay, consistency with the coastal policies and coastal area management act. I'm okay with that. Again, the density, in my mind, that it's not a bad idea in this location. It's close to the train station. We kind of identified this close to the train station as an area. It's still under 20, which is, I think, 20 per unit. 20 per acre is what we have for the incentive housing zone, where we require some affordable. This is still under that, and they are doing an affordable component, at least a fee in the road, which is okay. I think the traffic calming could be helpful. We can look at that. So that's, in my mind, is and there was significant public support, I thought, not just from the immediate neighbors, but from, I think there was 40 businesses signed a petition in favor of it. A number of people spoke in favor of it. The suggestion seems to be that this is it would be a good draw for people who will contribute to our community, people who will attend and be able to walk to our downtown restaurants. And I kind of believe that the residential stuff supports the commercial, and it's good. So that, in my mind, justifies it. I understand that the density is higher. I think that originally we backed away whenever it was 150, and now it's going to be up to 191. I think if you include these. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. Who's next?
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Yes, Fred.
I also, as you've said, we're concerned about density. And, when I took a look at it, I said, when we talk about density, what are we comparing it to? And the truth of the matter is we have to compare what was there. There was a very large factory over 100 years. The remnants of a big smokestack is still there. Thank God it doesn't puff smoke out anymore. That factory polluted the Branford River. It had, in doing some little research, it had 1,500 people who worked there every day. And this project diminishes every one of those negative aspects of what was there. And that's what we have to compare it to. For the neighbors, and I listened to them very, very carefully. I read all those letters, but I said to myself, if I was a neighbor there, would I want to live with a factory, smokestacks, and all that stuff? And families did that for generations over there, or something like this. And in the end, my feeling is that this project far surpasses anything that was ever there that you could compare it to. So, I look at it and say, I think it's a fair project. It's a good project. And so I would be in favor of it.
Chuck Anders here. Thanks, Fred. Anyone, why don't we, I'll just ask Joe Chadwick, what do you think? Did we lose Joe? Joe, you're muted. Yeah, I was Joe Chadwick.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, you're next.
Joe Chadwick speaking. I was on administrative mute.
Okay. Whoops.
I had sent Harry an instant chat, and I guess it didn't show up on his screen. My position is my position is that I'm in favor of the project. I feel that there is an awful lot of trepidation. There is always a suspicion of change and a discomfort of change. And I've heard an awful lot of, well, all my life I've been in Branford and this is the way it is. Or I moved to Branford and this is the way it is. But we tend to forget that the historical Branford is a much more vibrant place than what most of us have experienced in our lifetime. The Branford we have come to become accustomed to is really a victim of sort of the post-war deindustrialization. And the site has been just pretty unfortunate for a very long time. In terms of context and density, I am not really that disturbed by larger structures here because there is, for all intents and purposes, no relatable context or density. This is making its own context, and the density can be quite a bit higher, frankly. But this is not a bad density. The concerns about traffic, I believe, are valid, but honestly, in the amount of time I've been spending walking during the COVID amounts we've had, I find that the problem with traffic, I mean, you say traffic and it's automatically a bad word. Traffic has both a vector and a scalar property. You're going someplace and there is a volume of traffic that is going someplace. The vectors of traffic are directed mostly away from any of the neighborhoods. The main circulation routes like Maple Street, and unfortunately Roger Street will be getting hit with a little more traffic. No. Will it be half as much as we have now? Hard to say if it'll even be that much. But I mean, the problem of traffic is never really the volume. The problem of traffic is generally generated between the pedal and the steering wheel. It's just an unfortunate condition that we've had with a lack of skill and courtesy among drivers. It's a behavioral problem, it's an enforcement issue, and that is not within our purview. Volume of traffic is, I don't think the volume of traffic is going to be that terrible. In terms of the economic effect, I think is going to be beneficial. The analysis we got was really kind of lightweight and really didn't tell us anything that one couldn't have intuited, but I recognize that it's a definite boom economically, much better than a vacant site. The one thing I do want to bring up as sort of a side issue is we always, whenever these things come up, Bill Horn comes and gives us a scholarly pile of paper with very current information on sea level rise. We stroke our chins, nod our head, and we all agree sea level rise is bad. And that's as far as it goes. But we're in a position now where we have several projects that are on deck that will be reaching the end of their useful life in 30 to 50 years, which is the point when sea level rise is going to be a really, pressing problem to these structures. And I believe we need to be considering some kind of decommissioning fund for these buildings. In 30 years, any of these buildings will have gone through 2 heating systems. The roof will have been shot. They'll probably need a whole bunch of new services. It will be at a point where any prudent owner would just throw up their hands and walk away. And the residual effect of these buildings will be left to a municipality to take care of. I really believe we need to sit down and think of funding mechanisms that these projects can self-fund so that at the end of their useful life, they can be efficiently decommissioned and not be a burden on the next generation in terms of removing them from the ecosystem. I don't think this is a terribly hard thing. I don't think this is a terribly expensive thing. It's a marginal cost spread out over 30 years. But in 30 to 50 years, there will be a lot of structures on the shoreline that will be in dire condition and be structural and environmental hazards. And very likely people will be just abandoning them because that's the economic priority. We don't know who will own them at that point. We'll have no control over it, but we're sort of setting this in motion to be a problem without having a solution when there is in fact, a vehicle to make that happen. And I think that's it. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Joe. Joe Vayuzo?
Yeah, I got some. I've been given some thought, a lot of thought, and very much like Fred, though. Actually, Fred went back farther than I did. I was comparing to what's proposed now and what was approved whenever it was, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Actually, what Fred said, actually better, more damning situation back then than now. And I'm trying to compare buildings. I'm trying to compare apples to apples. And there's 4 buildings being proposed. 2 other ones, when with the first approval, there was two buildings more, plus another. You got to take another building, and it was going to be at a hotel conference center, and so at least one extra building. And I'm looking at the building and look at the density, but also there was an office complex where the brewery, a large office complex where the brewery is now. That would have, traffic-wise, I think that would have been a worse situation than the brewery is. The brewery, believe me, it draws a lot of people and a lot of cars, but it's mainly on a Saturday and Sunday weekends, not drive times in the morning and evening like if it was an office complex 5 days a week. It's a different type of situation. And there was also another office complex was going to be built where their overflow parking lot was. That would have drawn another traffic situation every morning and every evening, 5 days a week. I'm trying to compare apples and apples here and trying to compare what this is compared to what was approved. And then I look at Sylvan Point on the other side, and I feel for what people in that neighborhood are saying. But, Sylvan Point is quite a large complex. I don't know how many people are there, units are there, but I think it's in the neighborhood of 100 to 125 units. And I'm in that neighborhood quite often, several times. I rarely have to wait for any cars coming by when I'm at the stop sign or whenever I have to make a turn. I think residential units, it's spread out over time, over a 24-hour period or a 12-hour period in traffic wise. And I think it's a quiet kind of situation. It's not. I'm in favor of this project because I think it'll be quiet. It's like you have that 30-unit that first building that was built, the 30-unit 3-story. And realistically, you don't even know what's there in terms of traffic. I'm just trying to compare apples with what was approved there, and I think and then with the public access, it's going to be a really nice situation for public access to go all walking along the river. And overall, I think a better project than having the office complexes that was originally and a hotel conference center than what was originally planned there. But what Fred said, I didn't go back that far, and I didn't realize it, but that is a big contrast compared to that 1,500 people plus or minus working there, and smoke and all that sort of thing, and then the pollution. It's going to be a much, much better situation, much cleaner. I'm in favor of it, and traffic-wise, I don't think traffic is going to be that big a problem. Like I said, I never have a problem. I never had a problem when I'm in across the river, Sylvan Point area to go wherever I'm going. Overall, I think it's going to be a good project. People on the other side of the river, but at the same time, we did have some people looking downsize, looking to older people that are looking to sell their home, still live in Branford, and this is a perfect fit. We've had several people talk about that. So you're going to have not a generation. That type of housing is not going to be generating young families with many children. I think it's going to generate older people that are looking to downsize but still stay in Branford. I think overall it's going to be a project.
Chuck Anders here. Thank you, Joe. Marcy, do you have comments? Harry, can you unmute Marcy?
Been trying to text Harry to unmute me now for a while. I know I like to talk, but I'll keep it brief. I was very impressed with the town mindedness that the developer gave to, not just their development, but, opening up the river, doing the traffic calming, the way the landscaping is will allow for the continuation of the pollinator pathway for, more environmental uses. And, I think, when you consider, as Fred brought up, where this site is coming from and, how Hammer Field was created from all of the excess sludge that was generated from the facility, this is the type of project that can go a long way to repairing the river and really making it a place for everybody to get to. And I think that that's, a huge gain for the town. As far as density, I sat on the TOD, and, it was the goal of the TOD and the POCD to bring access to the river, the public to the river, to connect the town, with more development from the downtown to the train station. And I think this does just that. So those are two big pluses that I was appreciative of. As far as density, I don't think it's, the increase is going to be significantly impacted for the gains that were being offered to the public. I feel that, the vetting that was done with the architecture is making the buildings really quite beautiful, quite attractive. It'll become a feature to the town, especially for people coming off the train who might not be familiar with the town going to the brewery. So I think it acts as a type of gateway and, and a type of brand and identity for our town, which will help the town overall, whether it's the downtown or all the other residences and their property values. And then lastly, I think the type of housing, we don't have a lot of rental units. We have, condos. It fills a void in that regard as far as providing rentals and providing accessible rentals with the elevators in them for residents who might have physical issues, whether it be from age or handicap issues or what have you. So I think that's another, feature of the project. So, I see a lot of positives coming out of this project, and they just don't offset, the negative concerns that we heard, considering that I think there's a lot of other areas that, as far as traffic, that have bigger traffic problems, that these are feeder roads to the highways. It's not going through a intimate neighborhood, to get to a big project. So, so I think it's well positioned, and I think it does a lot to really bring our identity of a town to the river, and I think that that's really important. So, I'm excited for the project, and I'm glad to hear that the rest of the commission seems to be generally in favor of it as well.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Marcy. Harry, if I can ask you, it looks like we've got a big picture here, which is in favor of this proposal. Let me ask you, are there particular conditions or things or items, I don't know, it could be landscaping, lighting, stormwater, the usual sort of things that you think we need to address, or that what we want to call to our attention?
Thank you, Harry Smith, Town Planner. I do have a list, and I think the devil's in the details here a little bit with the final write-up. Just to make sure the commission's freshly aware of some of these issues that have all been brought up previously. There are a couple loose ends with the drainage. So I've talked to the town engineer and I'd be recommending a condition that would allow middle post any approval of additional information to him and possible changes if needed to his satisfaction. Make sure there's compliance with the zoning regulation regarding drainage. Landscaping, basically, I think it's in good shape. Would suggest a condition that the existing landscaping, and I'll share my screen quickly. Just this is also part of the, this is all the existing landscaping, the existing pension area, and the existing parking lot. This goes back. It's probably approved 20 years ago, built 15 years ago. I'm sure some of the vegetation needs some maintenance, possibly some pruning, some pension. So I think that should be probably part of this project. And it would like to go through and make sure any existing landscaping with respect to the existing part of the project here, then the 30 unit building, a community house here, and the 14 unit adaptive reuse of one of the old MAF buildings. But all the landscaping around there is still in place as it was approved back years ago. I think missing items should be back in. And, should the commission agree, we can have a landscape condition about that. There also needs to be, I think I need to look at the lighting information that was submitted recently. Hopefully it is all up to standards and the regulations. If not, submit proposal for a condition on that. There are E&S controls and jute matting along just inboard from the proposed Riverwalk here. It stops right about here. The grading becomes less steep in this area. But I think since you're right next to the river, it probably makes sense to continue that jute matting all the way over to the east. I guess that. Decide what you want to do with that proposal. You may recall that there was discussion during the public hearing about all of the uses that are currently allowed in the PDD. Some of these go back 20 years, the original proposal. And there was discussions that I had with the applicant's attorney. And I think we came to an agreed upon proposal for modification to those. So I would be proposing that as part of the write-up. That would certainly be there, and you can think about that makes sense to you all. The last communication with DEP did contain a few proposed conditions. One had to do with the dock. I believe one had to do with location of the infiltration gallery. I think it was in this location, making sure that the coverage of it maintained in terms of inspecting for any kind of erosion and that kind of thing on an ongoing basis.
Not green.
Sorry? Oh, sorry. And there may have been another one. So, I mean, I can flash those up, but I think those have been presented in the memo. I would certainly incorporate those as a proposal in the draft of an approval. The subdivision plan, which the most recently submitted one included additional easement area for the public space here, public access parking, the walkway up to here, and public parking spaces. It did not, for some reason, does not include the public access connection to the dock, and it does not include an easement for this walkway as proposed as public access also. So I think that needs to be looked at. Also on the subdivision, which basically breaks, proposed subdivision would break existing PDD up into three pieces. So this area here would be one piece to be retained by the existing condo association or transferred to them. Something like here would be another piece, again, part of the existing condo association or transferred to them. And in the middle would be the piece that's retained by the developer proposing this additional construction. So there would need to be some differences in ownership. There's, an access here and some parking, certainly shared access. Shared access here would be maintained. So those things need to be covered. They really are indicated on the subdivision map. I was hoping they would be. There may be some additional things that need to go on that map. And also the public access easements themselves would need to be a condition of approval. I would think the commission want to issue. The traffic calming, great ideas were expressed, unfortunately, because of timing and how the local traffic authority meets. There's some loose ends there. So I'm hoping, and I've expressed this to the applicant's attorney, that David Sullivan, their traffic engineer, would be willing to go in front of that group so that they have the information about ask him questions about it as an expert. I'd certainly be willing to go to that meeting myself. And I think there were a couple outstanding questions about that, particularly on Rogers from local traffic authority to implement impose traffic calming. And we probably need some kind of condition there to allow alternative should the LTA not be favorable to what the applicants. We also talked about enshrining something in terms of notice to future residents about the public access present on the site. Would be a condition. There are these little areas here that to be retained as lawn with reinforced soil underneath for access by the fire department. Probably want a condition requiring those be maintained free of landscaping and encumbrance access. Did talk about having an easement for an extension of the Shoreline Greenway Trail where the sidewalk currently is along Maple Street, possibly at Indian Neck Avenue. Allow that to happen, be funded by others. And last two items, one is there were a couple, I think, items recommended by the town center, our design review board, and probably want a condition to ensure there's the final report and the remediation action plan for the site. Holding on to that. And also one more thing is phasing. We could condition to allow the applicant to create a phasing plan that could either be approved by the commission after approval of these applications or by staff. That's what I have on my list right now. Probably have a few more items as I go through all of the materials and can either, take a stab at it, which I would be planning to probably do through the holidays. I can try and rough something out in terms of a more refined list, send those around. I mean, how would you like me to prepare it, I suppose would be my question.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Harry, I guess what of those do you believe you need input from us on?
I think, as most proposed conditions, usually I tee them up, and unless you tell me you're in disagreement right now with any of those, then I can draft something and, you can have it available well in advance of any voting on it at a future meeting and get back to me with any concerns, and you can certainly tweak it the night of the vote as well. I mean, we do have some time. We have through January 3rd, so the last meeting we could vote on it, I think, would be the proposed meeting of January 1st. I would certainly not recommend or delay it that long. There is some time to go through this and make sure everybody's comfortable.
Chuck and Chair, I'm fine with you preparing a draft, sending to us, and we can get back to you then comments and then vote on that. Is anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, so sounds like we're good with that.
Great.
Okay, I guess you can take this off the screen. Does anyone else have any comments on items 1 through 3? Those are the mayor's landing at this time.
Again, Harry Smith, not to make a comment, but I did try to make all the commissioners voting on this co-host, so you could mute yourself, unmute yourself at will. Marcy, if you maybe try that. It works. Great.
Great. Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Harry.
Well, welcome.
Okay, so and Harry, so just in terms of timing, the expectation is that you work on this over the holidays, and I don't have a January calendar in front of me, but so what?
Yeah, let me go back to that. Right now, the current proposed meeting dates in January are the 14th and the 28th. At the last commission meeting, I suggested adding a regular meeting on the 21st, just so you'd have it if you needed it. I would hope to have a draft to you well in advance of the meeting on the 14th. I will unfortunately have to announce right now that our wonderful assistant planner, who's only been with us a matter of a few months, taking another job out of so that is going to impact how we do business here, still in the short term and probably for quite a while. There is a notice of the job opening already posted. It was actually posted today outside. Has been posted internally for a short period of time. So, Caitlin's last day will be, actually should be at the next meeting, and that will be a full-time appearance. Commission, she might be doing some part-time work afterwards, and which would be great. So that kind of impacts things a bit on my side. So I will do the best I can, of course, and will certainly meet the deadline. We have run out of road here on time frame on the 3rd. That's another reason I'm suggesting a fallback date of
Okay. Did we actually schedule a meeting, or do we vote? Or
No, you tabled it.
Right?
Yeah, you tabled it, and I also, it's on the agenda for this meeting, so you could discuss it later on.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it was on the agenda for this meeting.
Yeah, it got on so that you'd have the opportunity to do that if you wanted to, in conjunction with the two applications.
Okay, I printed out an old agenda. Didn't say that. Okay.
Oh.
Okie doke. Then, okay, so we'll do that. Maybe we'll talk about scheduling if we can at the meeting. So that, anyone else on items 1, 2, 3? Not then, we'll move on to items 4 and 5, which are title-based. And again, to refresh everyone's recollection, for Tidal Basin is across from the brewery, Old Paul's Wire. Proposal is right now it's approved as a hotel for I think it's bed and breakfast hotel for across from the brewery, and the proposal was to convert that to another residential complex, 30 units, so that's the proposal there. We had a lot of similar issues that came up with this one as well. So before we start on this, Harry, is there anything you'd like to call to our attention? You need to bring to our attention.
Sure. Again, Harry Smith, Town Planner. Let me share my screen one more time. I would just again repeat that a memorandum from the town engineer dated yesterday, withdrawing that formally and substituting for it memo dated today. Names information just specific to the property subject to these applications. So again, this may want to consider this in conjunction with comment letter from the DEP. This goes back a few months now. Good. Just to refresh your memory, roll through this briefly, but describes the project, describes lot area, it's about the flood zone and the depth flooding. Cite some of the coastal hazard policies and the Coastal Management Act. Was a distinction between this proposal and the previous hotel. And if you want to read this, I can go slowly through it.
What are you referring to, Harry?
I'm referring to a letter again dated September 9th, 2020.
Can you put it on the screen, Harry?
Oh, isn't it on the screen?
No.
Oh, sorry. I thought I clicked the right button. So here, now can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
My apologies. So again, this is to the commission, September 9th. They are finding that the proposal is inconsistent with the goals and policies of the Coastal Area Management Act. Again, as I cited, reviewed information about the proposal, about the property, relevant Coastal Management Act policy, and they've highlighted in here in bold structural solutions, this is necessary to avoid. Now, this is a response to notation that the existing topography is very low at this property on large rock, but really not a revetment. There's concern the property damage of or eroded. You might see construct seawall. They just this letter is not from John Goucher, the environmental analyst. This is from Brian Thompson, who's the director of the Land and Water Resources Division of DEP. He's a couple levels above John in terms of hierarchy. The age. So if anyone does not have this document, and I can go through it more slowly so you can read it in detail, but I mean the bottom line finding is they're stating it's inconsistent with the Management Act, and this was discussed previously. Also refresh the recollection of so there's this letter from the applicant's attorneys in response, I believe, to the letter from DEP. Well, this is actually a response to referral comment. And just cites the Branford's flood management ordinance does not prohibit residential use in the flood zone. Again, you've seen this, so I'm not going to go through it, try to really characterize it. Saying the first floor is elevated 18 feet well above base flood elevation. All mechanics will be above flood elevation. And that another argument here, response. Comments that were made by the DEP previously. So I do have plans here, which are not much different than the plans for hotels previously approved. Basically the same parking underneath levels of residential development, based, living units rather than hotel rooms. Slightly different. This would be a private walkway, and there would be an easement offered. I believe a contribution towards of $25,000 represents the approximate cost of the Riverwalk along the frontage of the property. Similar improvements to the intersection here at Indian Neck Avenue and the cattle crossing, all tightening the road there. It's essentially a very similar plan. You've had a staff report submitted by consulting planner at the time, Powell Harbor Associate, Michael D'Amato, and Wiskowski. They also prepared, I will show you a memorandum about affordable housing and a variety of scenarios in terms of what might be a reasonable contribution. I submitted a supplemental staff report of density and cited several other issues here, including sea level rise, as mentioned before, transit oriented development plan, in terms of what was proposed there, traffic calming, pedestrian. Some of these have been agreed to, some of these were disputed by the applicant. Talked about density, those changes to the PDD. I think it was agreed that the increase in density would not be the entire PDD, which includes also the property of the brewery and that overflow parking area near the Maple Street Bridge, overpass over the train tracks. And referrals and findings are required. That was we included this diagram of townhouse units, which is one scenario in the TOD plan for development along Meadow Street. This I will turn. I was just talking about TOD plan recommended, here's the line for the Shoreline Greenway Trail. There is already a requirement for an easement along here. That might be an amenity the commission to consider. Again, improving the cattle crossing, that's included with this plan. And the waterfront boardwalk, that would be funded by this development. That. Again, this is the memorandum on affordable housing. Planner. I think I talked about already. That's a letter. So again, we have access to all the documents in the record if the commission wants to look at that. The letter from air traffic consultant, Sullivan, and Milo McBroom. E-letter. I think I've covered everything I've got up. So with that, I think I'll stop. And if there's anything else I can put up to facilitate the discussion, let me know.
Sure, Chuck Anders, Chair. Harry, I think you weren't screen sharing for the first thing you talked about, which was the engineer memo, I think.
Oh, let me highlight that again. It's identical to the last, but I am withdrawing this letter for both properties, this memorandum for both properties dated yesterday, and substituting memo dated today, the 3rd. It's the calculations, again, based on information already in the record on the plan submitted with these applications by the town engineer, who is a certified flood manager and a professional engineer.
And can you tell us what it says?
Just to summarize, it indicates proposed grades on the site vary from 5 to 7 feet above sea level, and that the approximate depth of flooding on the site, and with the 12-foot above sea level 100-year flood designation, would result in depth of flooding on the site varying from 5 to 7 feet, 100-year storm event.
Harry, could you refresh my memory? Was there an evacuation plan provided, given I didn't realize that the depth of flooding was so extreme in this location? Did they provide a evacuation plan in case?
My understanding is they provided an evacuation plan that is basically the plan from the Anchor Reef development. So this property was not included in the Anchor Reef PDD, but it's adjacent to it. The Anchor Reef PDD started basically across Brewery. That was the whole MIF property and the whole original PDD.
Right, but this corner seems much more prone to flooding. So I'm just trying to understand specifically what the people on this site are supposed to do when there's a major event.
Well, I will say, again, there was no residential development proposed in this area, either at the brewery site, and certainly not on this property, which wasn't part of the PDD. So this was industrially zoned. Again, site of Paul's Wire. And the original PDD did not envision residential development, not on the brewery property, and certainly not on this property. I can go back. I'll stop screen sharing and I'll double check the application file, make sure there wasn't an additional evacuation plan, addendum or something submitted while you folks. Okay. Unless there are any other questions anybody wants me to answer.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Barry. So, does anyone want to start with this one?
Okay, I'll jump in on this.
Okay, Joe.
On paper, I have no problems with this. If I were to read everything in just the pure platonic, what it says on paper, problems, everything I've read could sort of somehow be overcome. But there is a problem of practical reality, and I've got to say, I am frankly embarrassed that they came to us. And I sat there and listened to the presentation and said, yeah, sure, that's fine. We're swapping one residential use for another residential use. And that's, in the world of planning, it's just a use swap of basically the same category. The fact of the matter is it's not. If you're in a hotel and you're living by the train tracks overnight, you get up the next morning and you have a really funny story at breakfast, and probably a reason to come back once in a while. To live right next to the train tracks. I don't know if anybody's ever really spent any time next to that train. I live a third of a mile away. I like trains. It's very similar in my relationship to where I grew up in terms of distance and all that. So it's very familiar and comfortable to me. But there are days when a third of a mile away, it feels like that train is in my living room. Living right next to it, I believe it will be uninhabitable. I am afraid that this would be a tremendous investment at some point someone is going to say, we're not going to live here anymore. And it's just going to be an unfortunate folly. Every argument that's been made so far on technical grounds has been very cogent, very substantial. There have been an awful lot of very excellent technical arguments made. But when it comes down to the reality of living next to this, I am just so worried about it. In my undistinguished career as an architect, I have spent an awful lot of time working on very, very acoustically sensitive projects, laboratories, MRIs, sound studios. The amount of sound energy generated by that train cannot be mitigated to an acceptable level by any means that you can afford to build a building with for people to live in and charge rent for. If this were sort of the last place in Branford and people were like clamoring to live here, maybe they'd put up with it. But this would the noise of living next to the L in Chicago would be insignificant compared to this. I really feel badly about having long to say what I'm saying, but there's just really no other way to say it. But this I fear would be an unfortunate waste of resources to keep going and try to build this. But technically, the arguments are correct, and if I were to just go down the list on paper, I'd say everybody did a great job, and this is practical reality is just scary. That's it.
Chuck Anders here. Thank you, Joe. Fred, do you want to comment?
Yes, I think that the developer has a piece of property that he's entitled to develop. If a potential resident of that building, if it were to be built, did not like it, they would not go there, and word would spread soon enough that no one would go there. But I don't think that's our problem. I think that's the problem with the developer. That's something he has to consider, whether or not that's trained there. The trains don't go by 24/7. They probably pass there 3 or 4 times a day, the best I know. But maybe it's more, lives closer than I do. But I agree that there's who would want to live there? I don't know. But I'm not putting any money up to find out. But someone is going to. And, I think the fact that we already passed the same footprint, room size, building size already, it almost makes us inconsistent to say no to this. The tenants are different. There's no question about it. I would totally agree with that. But the tenants that developer brings in is not our problem. As long as he meets the zoning regulations, he meets the zoning regulations. And if tenants don't like where they're living because of a train, they will move out. And if enough people move out, the developer may get stuck. But that, again, isn't our problem. I don't believe it is. I mean, I think we have a set of rules that we live by. We passed an existing building already there. At least in my humble opinion, I don't think the use is really being changed that much. I mean, a certain number of people living in a certain number of rooms, a certain size building. And the risk of doing this, listen, I hope the developer heeds what's being said. I think what Joseph is, he's on the money with it. But if the developer feels differently, that's up to him to make that decision whether he wants to go forward or not. But looking at it, I wouldn't say no to the development. Am I skeptical about it? Yeah, I'm skeptical about it. But I think if the end result is that he falls within all the rules of the and regulations of planning and zoning, then you have to give it to him.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Fred. Marcy, you want to go?
Yeah, I like going after both of these because they're showing two sides of a different coin, and that's exactly where I sit. I've been on the fence, one way or another, and to hear Joe Chadwick's view of the train, I kind of chuckle because I just moved to a house that's very near the train, and I'm really surprised at how often I hear the train going by now, and maybe I just haven't gotten used to it, but it's, I'm willing to tolerate the train because I love the location of where I live at. And, I sort of see the same issue here, but in more extreme terms. I mean, you literally want a train in your backyard in order to be able to enjoy the view of the river and the ease of walking next door to go to the brewery. That's a very specific lifestyle choice. And that's really my biggest issue with this project is, I've time and time again tried to get the developer to address what's going on along the river for the sake of the residents. I think it was less important when it was a hotel and it was a more, people coming and going. They don't need necessarily the same site amenities along the river. I understand he may not want to open it up to the public, but just, in my experience and as a landscape architect and knowing how these projects are developed and how long they take and how much they cost, I think the 25,000 is just, flippant, for lack of a better word. It's not going to go far at all to accomplish what he's stating. The easement that they're providing for the public to get back to the street is very limited. The back promenade is really just fire access. There's no articulation of how that works for the residents. There's certainly been no offering for public access for it, for when the boardwalk does get completed, however long that takes. And in the interim, nothing was really addressed environmentally with regard to planting along the riverfront. There's no section showing us the high tide and the relationship of the water. And now it's really kind of hitting home why it wasn't presented, because it really doesn't work in favor for their application to show that they're potentially 5 to 7 feet in the flood zone when there's a flood event. And that really sort of tilted the scale for me today, because I think not only are you I don't mind density typically, so I think the building's great, but you combine that with the train, the Indian Neck on a sharp corner with no improvements to the cattle crossing, no real public access, only 25,000 for public use for the riverfront, no real outdoor space for the residents. I just feel like the project isn't developed far enough to function within the limitations, that it only answers the really basic requirements that we're requiring. And I just don't feel overly positive about this project. I'm just leaning against it at this point based on what I'm hearing people saying and just what I'm realizing about the flood elevations and really the lack of attention to the river and so forth. But I think the building itself is very nice, and you could put that anywhere else, in a different property, and I think it would be a great building, to have on the river. So.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Marcy. Joe Vayuzo, comments? Where's Joe? Oh. Joe, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute him. Harry Smith, no player. Okay, I think he's on now.
I'm on now.
Great.
All right. Now, where do I begin? This project was approved. I approved this project reluctantly, and actually for the hotel, and right now I wish I never did. One of my concerns is parking. You got 30 units, 39 parking spaces, and I had that concern then. But when it was a hotel, you have one car, you rent your room, and you're gone, and so it's one car, one room on average, and sometimes maybe no car because you might be coming from the train station or whatever. But now you got 30 units, 39 cars, not counting employees, and parking is got to be a problem there because there's going to be people there with more than one car. And where do you put the extra cars? It's so tight now that they're using every square inch of that property. And where do you put that extra? And if this river walk ever gets in place, where are you going to park those cars? Where are you going to park people that do the river walk? They have to have a place to park. Not necessarily there. They may be on the other side on Montauk Avenue, but that's a tight area as well. And put a 4-story building, even though it's 3 stories, but it's 4 stories because you got the extra 10 feet of space underneath for parking. Now that's a big. It's almost going to be an eyesore to have that type of building there, and I regret not saying that when we're talking about it with no. But anyway, I have problems with that, and also thinking that what this is just not a suggestion, but if that area was made into a parking garage, okay, of some kind, instead of a several-story parking garage, and take their overflow parking area that they have and create a building there, and that might be a better flip-flop the situation, because they decide to want to put a building in the overflow parking. What's that going to do to the brewery? Because when on those weekends, especially during the summer, it's seasonal, but during the summer, they're parking on the lawns, they're parking anywhere they can after the overflow parking is full. And so, I mean, where do you put all these cars? So if that was a parking garage and that overflow parking can be over there, and then propose a building in the overflow, which is even closer to the railroad station, which would help people get to that building even quicker. That might not be a bad idea, but that's not before us. I'm just using that as an example. But I'm more concerned with that parking situation of 39 cars with 30 units, and I can't see how that's going to be anywhere near enough to accommodate 30 units, because we all know that there's going to be people there that have more than one car. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
If I can just share, thank you, Joe. I guess I'll speak. I have similar mixed concerns. I guess on the pro side, that this again, it's it's residential development near the train station, which is we sort of generally encouraged. That's a good, although the density here is higher than I think the others. Again, I think the others was at 17, which I said was below the incentive housing. This gets you up to 24. It basically, I mean, there is nothing on the site. I mean, I guess there's a walkway in front or something, but there's not a whole lot of other space in the site. But, again, density not necessarily a problem. I think economic development, spoke in support, and there are others who spoke in support. The TOD plan, again, says some stuff. I mean, it's pretty mild what it says. It says a modest density may be good. But when it refers to this site, it basically says, hey, this is refers to it as a hotel, and that will help. A hotel would help the recreational and tourist part of this, which, again, that's not what they're proposing. The biggest concern I have, frankly, is the coastal area management. I take seriously the Coastal Area Management Act as part of what we're doing. This is the only letter that we've got from DEEP, and it was, I guess, from a couple levels up, according to Harry, that actually recommended denial. They didn't recommend denial either for the prior application for this site. I think they were concerned about public access on the other one, but they didn't recommend denial in general, and they haven't recommended denial for the Anchor Reef one, but they've recommended denial for this. They make a distinction between a hotel use. They said it's not ideal, but a hotel can be shut down and they can be removed. They suggested for residential use, I guess even a rental use, you couldn't do that. That can't force people out. I guess I don't know that and it wouldn't be accessible for emergency services. If in fact there is a flood, and the reality is this is a lot lower. This is a right at the 7. At the 100-year flood, you would get 5 to 7 feet of flood. Now their response is, hey, look, we're elevating it. The first floor is at is at 18 feet, and so even at 12, whatever, you're not going to be flooded, and and we'll get them to move their cars, although I don't know where they'll get them to move them to. But I think there's still potential concerns that people don't move out and emergency access can't get to them. And then Bill Horn did his spiel on this one too, and he said is the wisdom of building new development in a floodplain. And that's one of the differences, I think, also between Anchor Reef. Anchor Reef, at least since the last couple of decades, we've contemplated residential development, multifamily in that area, a permanent multifamily in that area, and that's and the question is how much, how dense should it be? This is the first time we've had a permanent residential use proposed for this. Again, the hotel use I consider more of a commercial use. Sorry, I wish that we approved it. I wish that would go forward. So anyway, those are maybe I could be convinced otherwise, but I have some reservations about this as well. So I don't know. Where do we stand, guys?
Well, is there anybody really in favor of it that's trying to convince anybody to do it? Or are we all just kind of marginally, agreeable to the presentation that they've done and really not confident in the good use of the project? I mean, to me, it seems like the latter.
Well, Marcy, when you consider the history of zoning, it was started so you don't put the hospital next to the garbage dump or the orphanage next to the dynamite factory. It's to make a compatible relationship of uses as well as a compatible of a city. And from the standpoint that this is not a compatible use. I mean, having residences right up against an active mainline train, it is not. It's not good. It's not a wholesome way to live. From that standpoint, I would have a whole lot of trouble trying to support this. The technical correctness of everything that was done. The practical reality just does not strike me as being what encourages a living situation.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Fred, you're the one, and I say your point is, hey, their property, let them build it. But do you feel you want to try to convince us, or
well, as I said earlier, I respectfully disagree with Joe. I agree with him, and I disagree with him. It sounds contradictory. I agree with him that who would want to live next to a railroad track with a train coming by several times a day. I wouldn't, but that's there's everybody has different opinions about that. There are lots of cities that have elevated railroad tracks and L's above them that go right by buildings. Is that the best scenario? No, it's not the best scenario. But I think what I looked at is this plan in a different form, but kind of the same thing, is not much different as far as size, height, room size, number of people, whatever. And we approved that. And if I can't understand how we could approve one and disapprove another. If we disapproved the first one, we came back with a second plan. We said, no, we didn't approve the first one. You're not going to get the second one. We've done that in other applications. Someone comes in with a one-family house, we said no. Comes in with a six-family unit, we said no. And then that was no. But I think we were consistent I'm just saying that if we're going to be consistent, then we have to look at what we've already done in the past. Look at it and say, what was it? I mean, Joe said, I regret I voted on that. And he may be absolutely true in saying that, but I'm just saying it didn't change what we passed. What we passed was that this applicant can build a hotel. Now, if he can't rent them, that becomes his problem. He may have to repurpose that building in some way, some manner. I mean, I wouldn't want to see an office building there because I mean, people are there all the time. You know, residents, people go to work, they go out and you know, dinners and stuff like that. So the length of time one would spend, and my guess would be who's going to rent it is not going to be, you know, some elderly couple that's, you know, looking for a lower type of senior housing. So when it's all said and done, there are people out there that will probably rent that building. And if he feels that he wants to make that kind of an investment and he meets all the regulations, especially based on what we've already done in the past, I don't know how we can say no.
Fred, could I say something, Fred?
Sure.
The only one difference is that I see when what you're saying that is that you're talking about people that live there, and we have to, now they're residents, and then we're talking about evacuation plans and storms and and all that sort of thing, compared to a hotel. That if there's a storm coming, pending or whatever, you're not going to have anybody. You're going to have should have nobody in that occupancy over there because they won't be there. They don't live there. So it's just the difference between a hotel and somebody that lives there is people that live there are going to be there and they got to get out if there's going to be a storm. But a hotel, they just won't show up.
Well, Joe, let me say this. I live on a street that when we have a hurricane, our street, not the street itself, but at the bottom of it, where the new firehouse was built, in a flood zone, floods so much that you can't get out. If you're on that street during a hurricane, you haven't left before it hits, and you're at, especially at high tide, you're going to be there for 3 or 4 days. I can tell you for a fact because that's happened to me. Most people abandon the property and they find another place for the 3 or 4 days. I don't. I stay there. I do it for different reasons. I stay there to act as some type of security on the street. That at least there's some light lit, and it doesn't make it accessible from another area to get into the street. But I understand that. But it's not like there's going to be a 100-year flood every day. It's a 100-year flood, not a 1-year flood or a 5-year flood or a 10-year flood. And there are lots of buildings that are in the same position on Meadow Street the same way. When it gets flooded, I'm just saying that realistically, okay, are all those things that everybody's saying true? No question about it, okay? But what's the frequency of this happening? Is it going to happen every day, or is it going to happen once every 100 years? And you're going to deny an applicant something that we've approved already because something that could occur in a 100-year period is going to make them worry about it. I respectfully disagree with that opinion.
Well, let me clarify. I mean, we've approved the hotel. I mean, doesn't that approval stand if we deny this? I mean, so, the question is a commercial use versus a residential use, and we've approved the commercial use, and that would remain in effect, would it not?
Correct.
So to me, that's the philosophical discussion is, the commercial functioning of a hotel versus permanent residency. And, I can appreciate Fred's flood, every 100 years, but, Storm Sandy and Storm Irene were both two events that happened, within 2 years of each other. And it's been, 4 or 5 years since. So, it's really an unpredictable thing. I think the sound argument with the train, yeah, I mean, if people want to live near a train, that's their right. I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think it's certainly going to affect the value of the property, and that's the developer's burden to bear. I'm concerned about the revetment along the river, that there's nothing being done to address the river, to really provide public access in conjunction with the TOD. And those are the items that were put in place, whether it's residential or commercial, they were put in place to make the intersection of the public and the private in a more dense way justifiable. And I'm not seeing that here. So that's, a major reason that it has me leaning the other way. And, and like I said, I really like the building. I think it's a beautiful building. And it's, and I'm going back and forth in my mind about the size of the lot. It's a very tight lot. It's sort of sectioned off and wedged in its own little corner. And there's not really a lot of sides to evacuate on, except for along the river. They can't cross the tracks. They're not going to jump in a boat to evacuate. Whereas, on the other side of Branford Landing, you've got much more space. And so the density question of units per acre feels a lot different to me. So, I'm comfortable with approving the hotel use. I still would like to see them do things along the river and justify that, but I'm comfortable with the decisions that were made. Am I comfortable with approving a residential use? I'm not. So I would just assume, we gave them 2 shots, before, did we approve something before the hotel use? And also, didn't they change the PDD to allow the opportunity for residential? We like you said, we weren't planning to put residential in that small area because it was so small. So I guess I'm just not convinced yet. So.
Solid argument.
Yeah. No, Chuck Anders here. Fred, I think you make a reasonable point that what's the difference? I think in my mind, there's a difference in the CAM report. That one said, okay, provided you get the public access done, and you can, people could differ about whether we did enough on that, but we provided something. In this case, they're saying don't do it, and they make the distinction that between the commercial and a hotel use and a permanent residential use. I mean, even if they're renting, it's still your resident. It's, you have a year, years for a year or whatever. And they point out problems that, and it is, it is a lot lower than, some of the surrounding area. And it will be subject to more nuisance floods too, because, that's one of the points Bill Horn, I think, made, that even short of the 100-year flood, because this is so low, you are going to be, subject to flooding, on maybe new moons, or I don't know, you'll see it more. And they'll have to at least move the cars even for that, even if it's not a long duration. The concern, I guess, is that if in fact you're stuck in your house for 3 days and there's an emergency, there's a 911 call, that the medical may not be able to get to it, or if there's a fire or something like that. I mean, I think that's, at least that's a distinction that's made in the CAM letter. From there too. I'm also just personally reluctant when we, when we recommend something, there's got to be good reasons to go against them. I just think that's my concern is precedent as well a little bit. And I give some, again, it's not like we're improving. There's an existing building that's been there for a while, and they want to make it flood safe. We don't have approval right now for a permanent residence. So it is, that's kind of my concern there.
Chuck, Fred Russo, may I say one more thing?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to agree with Marcy in this respect. Not that I didn't consider it, but I think she brought it to life, which it helps me a little bit better. And that is that they made a change for residential. Not, it wasn't already, for residential, it was commercial before. And, that there was a permit, an approval on the land. So I guess let me clarify what I was thinking. I don't want to see the applicant just totally reject it because of whatever. And my point was that we already proved something. So I think I would modify what I said to this respect. That if the water's 2 foot deep on that property or 5 foot deep on Mariner's Landing or vice versa, it's flooded. Okay, so the flooding part doesn't really concern me as much, because once the water is over the blacktop and on the property, a flood's a flood. But I do agree with Marcy that there is an approval that we could live up to the approval. I mean, if it doesn't meet their criteria today, it might meet it next year. They can always come back and say, okay, let's do the hotel. Now it's a good time to do it. So, it might have been timely that they had to make this switch from hotel to residential. And so on that basis, I guess my concern is that we're not shooting down the applicant because we just want to shoot him down. But I think the fact that he has something in place, that he can build something there with conditions, I would assume, then I'm okay with that. I mean, I don't care if it's a hotel or it's a residential. And I said, and I would stick by it, that the size of the building, that shouldn't be an issue, or the number of rooms, or even the amount of parking, quite honestly, because those buildings, even any residential building is not rented 100% all the time. I think Marcy would agree with that. So there's always going to be extra spaces around. But I think I clarify myself, and I'm happy to do it, is that the fact that they have a permit or an application has the ability to build a hotel as was approved, I'm okay with that. And I would yield to those who feel, for whatever the reasons are, that it shouldn't be residential. I'm not fighting it residential to commercial. My argument is that I want to make sure that our applicant has the best opportunity to develop his property. And I think all of you made wonderful statements about it. And I'm willing to agree with Marcy. It should be commercial. And I agree with everybody else that it shouldn't be residential.
Chuck Andrews here. Thank you, Fred. Do other members have any comments? Okay, so then it sounds like we're looking for resolutions of denial is what we're talking about, and there's sort of a mixture of reasons. But again, I think we need to emphasize that they have the existing approval, and they can build that, and we can grant extensions for them to build it if they need that. I would think, because we did approve it. So, any other thoughts from anyone? Okay, Harry, then it's your job.
Harry Smith, Town Planner. Let me take a quick stab at what I heard. It seems like there's, like you said, a mix of reasons. One reason I did hear, certainly from you, Chuck, and I didn't hear a whole lot of, outside of maybe Fred, disagreement about the comments from DEP regarding inconsistency with the CAM, Coastal Area Management Act, reasons they stated in the letter. I could cite that as a reason for denial. I also heard sufficient parking, concerns about lack of amenities, and lack of appropriate treatment of the shoreline. And essentially the other concern about the actual proximity of the residential development to the train tracks and that not being really appropriate and something that should be allowed. So the general theory of zoning should control things and make sure things that are incompatible are not located next to each other. So did I sum up what I heard? I know, would it be fair to say those collectively would be the reasons for denial?
Yes, it sounds like.
Again, with this type of thing, my understanding is you can simply say it's inconsistent with the POCD, inconsistent with the Coastal Management Act. You don't need to necessarily cite all the reasons that everyone articulated. You don't need much of a reason to deny it because it's a discretionary act on the commission to approve it. So, again, I can talk to, the town council, but about how to frame it in a way that, is appropriate.
Okay. I think you can come up with something and we can tinker with it.
Yeah. Why don't I come up with a flesh out list, and I will consult with the town council about what the sort of legal requirements might be for a denial and what site, what's in the site. I can possibly throw, other things that aren't as central to a reason for denial as, other concerns mentioned included. Blah, blah. I'll take it and run with it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments by anyone on these items? If not, then did you say my agenda doesn't have anything else on it, Harry? But did you?
The revised agenda that was actually filed had, you can table the consideration of the schedule. I think with your decision on tidal basin, or at least your consensus, that would need to be decided by January 8th. So I think since it's a denial, then I can prepare that fairly quickly and would possibly have it ready for the 10th. I might suggest, if I can't, a special meeting on the 17th of December, and you could meet quickly to vote on it then. Would certainly give the commission time to look at reasons I probably use denial.
Okay, why don't we then just defer the next meetings, the schedule for next year to our next meeting, because then we have a better sense of where things.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I think that's everything then for our agenda tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, then does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn. Marcy here.
Motion made by Marcy. Is there a second?
Second, Fred Russo.
Second by Fred. Joe Chadwick, in favor?
Chadwick's in favor.
Joe Vayuso in favor?
What about you, so in favor?
Marcy in favor?
Marcy in favor.
Fred, you in favor?
Fred's in favor.
And I'm also in favor. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Hey, thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.